Namaskaram. Welcome to another episode of the Project. I'm your host Vytheeshwaran, and in today's episode, we will spend some time to talk about cognitive biases in music. Cognitive bias happens when we look at the world through our lens. And this means that cognitive bias is everywhere and is in every one of us, however rational and objective we think we are, which in itself is a bias. Do you know that on an average, we make around 34,000 decisions each day? Our judgment is often clouded, either consciously or unconsciously, by our experiences, motives, and emotions that lead to such biases. Not all cognitive biases are bad, but as musicians, it is important for us to be aware of these biases and work on them to improve our quality as a musician and as an individual. In this episode, I will provide an overview of some of the common biases that occur in the world of music and provide some tips on how to capitalize and or overcome them. So let's get started. As a musician and as a learner, one of the most common biases that impede our journey is the confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the process of searching of evidence that supports our opinions. This often leads to us overvaluing evidence that supports our opinions while discounting or undervaluing evidence that contradicts or weakens our opinion. Confirmation bias often comes to play when musicians often rely upon their past experiences trying to adapt the same in every scenario that they encounter. This leads to stereotyping and innovation gets stymied. Confirmation bias also happens on the other side of the table, where rasikas are often attenuated to their opinions and approach to music that they may not be open to even consider something different or new. The best way to overcome confirmation bias is to play the role of a devil's advocate in questioning the validity of the conclusions that you've reached based on your experience. This often helps reevaluating our position and help us see through this bias. Another common bias that we encounter in the music world is the status quo bias. This is an emotional bias where we perceive the current situation to represent a baseline and we prefer to remain at this baseline at all times. Any deviation away from it is perceived as negative, even if such a deviation may objectively be better. Status quo bias affects both musicians and rasikas and tend to impede the evolution of music. The musical format or padhati that we have today in both Carnatic as well as Hindustani music are a result of evolution of musical forms over centuries, and it is important for us to remember that this format that we have right now is definitely bound to change. While we may not be able to stop the change, we definitely have the power to shape this change. It is therefore important to realize and embrace change in order to play a meaningful part in the evolution of our musical forms. The next one is for the upcoming generation of music teachers. This is known as the curse of knowledge bias. This happens when an expert is unable to look at an issue from the perspective of a less informed person. This bias happens when the teacher is unable to empathize with the learner. This usually is the single factor that differentiates great teachers from the rest of the teachers. While all teachers are genuinely in the pursuit to simplify things for their learners, we often end up in a tailspin overcomplicating things. It is therefore important to spend some time introspecting on your teaching methods and, if possible, have discussions with your peers to observe their methods and exchange notes. It is also a good practice to attend lecture demonstrations of senior teachers, not just for their content, but also pay attention to their teaching methods. A careful study will help you identify elements that set them above the rest of the crowd, and you can make a conscious effort to imbibe these qualities and apply them in your teaching. I hope you found this episode informative and helpful for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to write to us, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. As always, you can reach out to us over Facebook, or you can write to us at theantharagandharamproject at gmail.com, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. Namaskaram.